Hello, Lindsay. Welcome to Power Women Wellness. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm very excited. I know that there's lots of things I want to geek out with you on, but before we get started, I just want you to introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Lindsay Preston, and I am a leadership and formerly life coach, now in the leadership space, working with corporations on their leadership development and leadership coaching. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I love that. And tell us more about you. What else are you juggling in life outside of work?
Yeah, so I have two kiddos, one who's 14, another who's about to be 7, so very involved in their activities. Like my daughter right now is in The Little Mermaid. She's Chef Louis, if anyone remembers that character. So I'm up there all the time working with her on choreography and all that stuff. So
That that's really cool. Yeah, I have a 14-year-old son and then a 11-year-old daughter.
Oh,
So kind of similar season of life, and it's a lot.
yeah,
It's a lot.
yeah.
Okay, so what got you into doing what you're doing now? Was there a lesson along the way, or have you always kind of been in this industry and just loved it?
Yeah, so going back to my life coaching days, I was in my late 20s, had been in HR for a bit, actually owned and managed a dance studio, which was really fun and
Okay.
exciting. Had my daughter, and then I was introduced to coaching because I had some personal stuff going on. My then partner, I found out, was living a double life and all
Oh
that
my
fun
gosh.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. So, in that, of course, I went to therapy, found therapy to be helpful, but I was like, oh, I'm just wanting more. And somebody suggested coaching to me. And at the time, I thought it was really wacky and out there and scammy. But I found a process that was based in neuroscience and signed up. And within the first few weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I've learned all of these tools, like the voice of the ego. Like, who knew that even existed, right? And so from there, I was like, this is the profession I've always wanted, and started to become multi-certified from there.
I love that. I know. So you started off, was it considered life coaching? I
Yeah.
know. And so tell us more about like that term because I think everyone does kind of like, what does that mean? And like, it's like, do you have to have life all figured out to do it? Which I know is not the case. I have some friends who do it, but I'd love
Yeah.
for you to kind of like explain too of like what it is because it's not scammy.
Yeah. So obviously, coaching isn't regulated. So you can encounter some of the scammy stuff, which is
Right.
unfortunate. But I would say at the core, coaching is really for people who have a pretty even ground in life and they're wanting to just amplify that. So typically,
Mm,
they're high achievers and there's just something that's happened in their life, like for me, the kind of double life thing, for them to kind of be rocked to their core and say, okay, I've got to change some patterns here and do something different. And a lot of them had tried therapy too, again, had some success. But at some point, they're like, I'm just wanting more. Like, I'm wanting
yeah.
something more actionable, more action oriented or results oriented. And so that's kind
Love
of it.
that.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, yeah. And I know that we'll talk about Enneagram and all that, but I really loved your definition of wellness. Because she's mentioned in our questionnaire that wellness is a state of living of a thriving, fulfilling, meaningful, healthy, and satisfying life, physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, to be a high performer. And I totally agree. Like, well, health is all of those areas. Same with us. Obviously food is a huge part of what we do, but there's still so many other things that contribute even physically, like, right, the environment, our stress, our sleep, just all these other lifestyle factors. So I love that there's honestly so much to unpack there. But has this kind of come easy for you in creating this life of just like, as you mentioned, there's so many areas of wellness. What areas do you feel like you naturally were really good at, and what areas like emotionally or mentally, like what areas did you struggle with?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I've never thought about that. Um, I think for me, spiritually, I've always been a spiritually inclined person.
Okay.
Even as a young age, when I would see certain religions and stuff, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's such BS. Like, I can't believe they're kind of portraying that. And I didn't grow up in like a religious or spiritual
Okay.
home. And so I've just kind of been, I guess, gifted in that way. And I think physical too. I grew up as a dancer. My mom modeled going to jazzercise all the time and doing that in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of always been a thing. But emotionally, that's where I've really struggled. I've really had to prioritize that. And I think too, kind of being an elder millennial, we were the ones that really started
Mm,
to figure that out. I'm sure you can relate.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
so just learning all those tools and doing all those things, but also in that, we were modeled a lot too of, this high achieving kind of lifestyle. I think it's just kind of the
Yeah.
American dream, right? And that's when it really started to hit me in my kind of mid to late 30s. Of at that point, my coaching practice was doing great. I was hitting all my goals, like my dreams were coming true, and my body could not sustain it. And so
Mm.
things started to crash down on me, and I was like, oh my God, like what is the problem? And so that's when I had to really look at
Yeah.
even more of the physical stuff because we think just working out and like eating somewhat clean, but I had to look at like
Yeah.
hormones and this thing called HRV and a nervous system and all that whole world.
Totally. I know. And then it's like, okay, that's a rabbit hole that I don't want to go down. But I would love to like back up a little bit onto the spiritual aspect of it because man, it's been a journey for me this year too. I never grew up in like believed in like God, but like we didn't like go to church and we didn't practice it or whatever. But it kind of came naturally to me, this desire to like want to understand what that is. But I'm thankful that it never was like, shoved down my throat. I was just able to explore as needed. But this year is so interesting because I just feel like it's been so different because I don't know. I don't even know what got me into this like rabbit hole. But I think it was just like, yeah, watching like interviews, like not interviews, documentaries with like cults and like I don't know. Then I started seeing religion in like kind of a different light, and that was interesting. And it actually surprisingly never changed my core beliefs spiritually because I do like believe it's such an important part to wellness. Like you said, there's finances, there's physically, there's mentally, and I just think spiritually is really big because even in some of my training with different in my degrees, and one of my favorite things about school was always learning from different naturopaths or conventional people in the medical field or functional. And anyways, just all these different points. And I remember one of my naturopathic doctors mentioned, as we're kind of going through like patient intake, there's a question of like, do you feel like you have purpose in life? Like something a little bit like deeper.
Yeah.
And every patient that didn't feel a purpose, didn't didn't have that like spiritual connection actually struggled with health sometimes the most.
Hmm.
And I just found that so interesting. So tell because you kind of have the same upbringing in the sense of like you really didn't grow up religious. So like how do you feel? And maybe this is also a work in progress because I feel like it's always kind of a work in progress to be honest. But how do you feel like did you develop that or are you still like on a I don't know. Tell me more about that. I just want to know.
Yeah, so going back to the purpose question, that's so interesting because when I did my coaching process that I used to do in my life coaching practice, we would build up to finding someone's purpose. And we did all this kind of releasing of like the ego and these, we call them bullet holes, which is like traumas. And then we got up to this place of like understanding their authentic self, which led to this purpose. And it's so interesting to see the shift that happens in someone once they start to
Mm,
figure that out. And a lot of people think their purpose is their job, and it's really just a way of being, of just, for me, it's love. So it was like, okay, I'm leading
mm,
everything with love, and everything that I'm doing is in that headspace, right? And so it was interesting, again, the people who really embodied that and really opened up to that and how their life would change versus some clients who didn't really open themselves up to that. And even what was more interesting to me is clients who didn't believe in any kind of spirituality. So they were atheists.
yeah.
They would not be able to hold the growth that we did in the coaching process because so many times, it'd just be like what we see in our immediate world, which can be really dark and heavy at times. And so they would kind of feed into that negative thinking versus, okay, what's the bigger
Mm.
picture here? Like, why
Right.
do you think this is happening?
Why are we here as like humans? And that's why
Right.
I'm like, if you don't have something to ground you, I'm like, ooh, I feel like that would be difficult. Not impossible. I don't want to say anything's impossible, but that's interesting you say that because I would imagine it would be more difficult than someone who does have like just an understanding of, I don't know. I mean, no one really knows, but like the higher understanding of like a
Yeah.
spiritual depthness there.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that that's like what you've seen in clients. Anything else you'd want to add there too?
Well, I would say what's been interesting too is, I've obviously had clients come in who have had a religion, and a lot of them were Christian. I think I had like a couple Jewish people, a couple Hindus. But what was interesting is in that process, especially for the Christians, as they kind of came into themselves, unpacked kind of, again, these like bullet holes or limiting beliefs, they realized how their religion was starting to manipulate them. And they would
Mm,
9 times out of 10 kind of come to this general consciousness that a lot of people talk about, even like with past lives or like, if, near death experiences and like this common theme once they come to their
yeah.
truth. And I always found that so interesting that everyone's truth they were guiding themselves to it, and it was the same
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you
Yeah.
feel like you align with anything spiritually or no?
Um, I think I've tried to put like some people have said like it's related to like Buddha maybe or Hindu or but
Yeah.
I don't know enough to know. I'm just like I don't know. I just believe in
I love that.
them.
No, I love this like type of conversation too, because I feel like you also have to be open-minded because this is something that is just usually people grow up with it and it's just like, what they believe. And I find it so fascinating too, with especially with like spirituality is like you can be literally reading the same book. For example, I'll just use the Bible and like two people can be reading the exact same text, but take away something completely different. And that's just like, I think like there's so much beauty in that. And it's like whatever religious text is just, we'll all pull something very differently from it. I just find that really fascinating. But anyways, I see that a lot with our patients on the health side of, yes, the people that don't have more of a, I don't know, spirituality grounding. I do feel like their health issues are usually a little bit harder to unpack. And so same with my professors, they mentioned the same thing. And so it's interesting kind of get to that deep level of wellness. And it's like, whoa, this is so cool. Cause it's definitely not like naturally what we learn when we're learning diet, but I'm like, health is so incredible and just wellness in general, because there are so many different layers that impact it. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. So tell me more about your like history with like burnout, hormone imbalances. I love that you mentioned that. I hated that you went through that, but tell me more about like your journey with that. Like, what were some red flags for you of knowing like, okay, something is off here, and then what were some of the things that you did to move the needle?
Yeah. So it was about 2021. So I guess I was like in my late 30s, right? So as I said, my coaching business was really taking off. It was post-pandemic when everyone was home too, right? And they had
Yeah.
extra money. And so at that point, I had coaching client like back to back to back to back. Now you have to realize too, at home, I also had kiddos because they
Yeah.
weren't in school. And at that time, my son was only 2, so a little one. So that was a lot to manage. And so a part of me thought, okay, this is just the season of life, right? But then there was a part of me that's like, but I'm not sharp. Like I come to these calls and I'm really fatigued. I'm having a lot of brain fog. And I just started to feel like I was losing myself and losing my intellect, which scared the heck out of me,
Yeah.
to be honest. And so one thing led to another of me kind of exploring the ADHD route because I had a client who had it. And you kind of have this mindset of what ADHD looks like. You think of the hyperactive kid.
Mhm.
And when she was explaining it to me, I was like, oh man, I have a lot of those symptoms. And so I always knew if I was going to explore some sort of like medication route, I wanted to make sure it was going to be legit. And so I went the brain scan route and had them scan my brain
Oh,
and
like Dr. Amen?
yes,
Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So long, ADHD was on my brain and depression, which was shocking to me to see. Of really, it was
Mm.
just an overactive limbic system that was causing minor ADHD symptoms. And I would have never told you I was depressed because I think I was high functioning for so long.
Yeah.
And so started to go down that journey and that was helpful, but there were still just these pieces of like, yeah, but I still don't have energy. Like I still don't
Yeah.
feel good. And at this time too, I also had another client who's a chiropractor and started to see her because I could really trust and kind of lean into that process because you hear the horror stories about
For sure.
chiropractors.
For sure.
And so I felt like that was the first time I got in my body. And so there was a part of me too getting into my body that I thought, oh my God, am I like dying of cancer? Because I'd never been in my body before. I'd never really felt in my body. So going through that process, and then again, it was just still like there's something missing, something missing. And my chiropractor client had said, you've got to go to get your hormones tested. I've gone to this place. They're going to look at it like in a holistic point of view. Because I had gotten them tested with Amen and they were like, everything looks good. So once I got them tested in the holistic point of view, they're like, you have way low testosterone. Your thyroid is off. You have yeast in your gut. And so started that process, which actually was just a few months ago. And
Okay.
immediately just started to feel amazing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like myself again. Like I feel like my like early 30 something, 20 something self, but now I have the wisdom of like a
Yeah.
40 something. And so I feel like it's taken this kind of 2-3 year journey to fully kind of wrap it all up. And of course, in this
I
process,
love that.
like exploring even like deeper traumas and like going to therapy and like releasing everything I need to like get out of my body. So
I
yeah,
love that.
it's been a lot.
I love that. I love that. Yes, I know this health journey, like I said, it's a rabbit hole for sure because and everyone practices a little differently on like what they, start with and stuff. We actually don't usually start with like hormone, like female hormones, as much at first because they respond so much to every other area of the body. So gut health is one of them. So a lot of people wonder like, oh my gosh, what's my estrogen or progesterone or testosterone? I'm like, well, there's so many like layers before we can even get there because a lot of the times they will start balancing when everything else is good. It's just my example is like it's just like when we're really stressed out and our period may be late. Exactly. Like it's responding to the stress. And so you need to work on like adrenal health and then even that's like a layer, but all of these things before you even look at like female hormones. But I love that you even pointed out that you just saw like a huge difference too of like, one practitioner being like, oh, they're all good. And the other practitioner being like, no, because there are totally different reference ranges
Yeah.
that we consider optimal versus like, something that you have to be diagnosed with. And so that's why I feel like a lot of women get into that gray area of like, I don't feel well, but my labs say they're normal, or my doctor says my labs are normal. Like, well, they're looking at big red flags of like, oh yeah, you have like Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism or PCOS. Like they're looking for a diagnosis. But if your labs, quote unquote, aren't bad enough, or, but you can still be suboptimal, you can still not feel the best. So
Yeah.
I love that you were able to like get some answers and then also like got not even just got answers of like how you were feeling, but also dove a little bit deeper too, especially into gut, because that's like our favorite place to start because there's so many things that can be happening in the gut that absolutely will influence the entire body. Like it's very stressful on the body. A lot of people think stress is just like, oh, my job is stressful, or yeah, have this really big deadline I'm so stressed about. But having a gut imbalance and like having yeast overgrowth is also stressful in the body. So no one ever talks about like internal stressors. They usually just talk about external. And just as you mentioned with like just a high functioning, like, probably someone who has depression, same with like stress. Like there's so many high functioning stress people that yeah, people don't even realize like what truly is like rest. Like you've had this like, I feel like I wasn't in my body. So anyways, I find that really fascinating I always challenge the norm because they're like, no, I feel like maybe I feel okay. But I'm like, but could you feel better? Is there like a layer that you haven't reached yet? And then you look back and be like, wow, I was really tired and I didn't know that.
Yeah. You know what's so
So,
interesting too? I was so focused on the brain for so long, just given my line of work and like all the neurotransmitters in the brain. And then somebody said to me, there's just as many neurotransmitters in the gut. And
yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, like how did I miss this?
It is. It's a second brain. It's known as like the second brain.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of production of neurotransmitters. And so actually I was just on a call with a potential patient. She's becoming a patient, but we were talking about like anxiety and depression and what she has. And unfortunately, she's like, I'm in therapy and doing meds, which is great because some people just need that little boost to be able to start getting through life.
Yeah.
But I was just like, oh my God, don't stop there. Because I'm like, yes, I'm like, as you're talking to me about like all these symptoms that actually are not GI specific, there are things like acne and all this. And I'm like, that's actually a sign like gut isn't well. And so a lot of the times, like I'm just constantly asking why. Like, okay, like if female hormones are off, well, why? Let's just say it's stress. Well, why is your body stressed? Okay, well, there's, obviously some external things, some internal things. Well, why do you have yeast overgrowth? And then like once you answer that, then you ask, well, why did this happen? And when you keep asking why, you get to like such a good foundation of,
Mhm.
oh, like now we're getting to the root cause of it. Because you can't just be like, oh, I have dysbiosis or yeast or a parasite. Well, why? Why wasn't your body able to keep that in check? Like there's so many deeper layers, which I love. It's my
Oh my
favorite thing.
gosh. I
Basically,
love
my favorite
that.
question is why.
Yeah.
So I love that you focused a lot on brain. And obviously, you know that like sleep is very important. And I know you mentioned using the Oura Ring, which I geeked out about it with actually a chiropractor a couple episodes ago. But I would love to kind of hear like the data that you really love getting from it, and how things change based on your Oura Ring. Like, what do you change? Because I know it changes so much for me. Like, it's the first thing I check when I wake up, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's today going to look like?
Totally. Totally. So, kind of going back in my health journey, the first thing, I said I was like feeling really tired and run down and brain fog. And so, I don't know if Aura was out yet or if it just wasn't in my consciousness, but I got some sort of like sleep monitor and I can't even remember what it was, something cheap, because I thought it's got to be my sleep, right? And again, having had a little one, I was like, oh, this is just part of the life. And it was so interesting because the sleep came back really great. And that's when I started on the brain journey. It was like, okay, something's off here. So, kind of fast forward to about 2 years ago, I got actually a sleep number bed. And
Okay.
so I would wake up in the morning and kind of get these sleep stats. And one of the things was HRV. And I was like, what is this HRV thing? So I started digging into it and I was like, oh man, this is wild. It's like basically saying like how you're monitoring stress and how regular your nervous system is, right? And so I started talking to clients about it. And one of my clients is like, oh yeah, my Oura Ring tracks that.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh man, what is this Oura Ring thing? So went down that rabbit hole, right? Got an Oura Ring and I was like, this is wild. Like to be able to see, of course, not only sleep, but then the deeper layers of sleep of like how much deep sleep are you getting? How much are you in REM? How long does it take you to fall asleep? Like the overall time, which are HRV, right? And then to be able to see my activity levels. So I thought I was a lot more active than what I was. And so that was really eye-opening.
That's so interesting too, because I actually feel like the Oura Ring is way sensitive to activity. So I actually don't like looking at activity on the Oura Ring. I've tested kind of both like Oura Ring and like Apple Watch. And Apple Watch I feel like is very on point. And Oura Ring is like almost always double like what it
Really?
actually is. And then I went down on a Reddit thread of just like, okay, is it just me or like because I like have a walking treadmill under my desk when I stand it up. And so I usually put my Apple Watch in my legging and so it like counts because obviously if I'm sitting here working, it's not going to count. So I put my watch in there. And then at one point I was just like swinging my arm just like as normal. So I wasn't working. So the Oura Ring would catch it too. And yes, it just counted like way too much. And I don't know if it's maybe on your finger and maybe it's just more movement. I'm not really sure. But then the Reddit thread was like, oh my gosh, yes, I hate the activity in the Oura Ring because it like doubles the amount. It says like I'm getting more than what I am actually getting. I'm like, okay, I'm having that same experience. So that's very interesting that
Mm.
you feel like you did it. You got the opposite.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I do a lot of bar, given my dance background.
Yeah.
And so in bar, you're doing these really small movements. And so I'll leave a workout class and it won't even like register that I worked out. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I that's the only or thing on the Oura Ring I don't pay attention to with just the activity and my Apple Watch is what I kind of go by, but that's interesting.
That's so interesting. Yeah. But the other big thing that I loved in Aura was the stress, like seeing your daily stress throughout the day and then your overall resilience. That's been
Yeah.
huge. And it's been huge for me to teach clients that too, because if somebody's coming in their stress all the time, I'm like, okay, monitor your stress throughout the day. What is stressing you out? So it could be, oh, I hung out with my mom. Okay, well, what is it about your mom that's stressing you out? Maybe there's a
Yeah.
boundary that needs to be set. Like maybe it's her nervous system and you're picking up on that. So like what do you need to do? And so we've gotten more strategic with stress because
Love
of the
that.
Aura Ring. And to it, it's allowed people to see like, I have clients that again are very high achievers. And so they'll have seasons in work where they're like, okay, well, it's just going to be a really hard month. And so they'll see their resilience start to tank. And then they see how much they actually have to do to rebuild themselves from that. And so it's
Mm.
allowed them to see, and I'll say I'm in this boat too, of is it really worth it?
Mm.
And so then they're able to like really set boundaries with that. Some of people have even got new positions because it's like it just kills my body at the end of the day.
I totally feel that way with business, honestly. Because get in those seasons of where I just be like, burn it all, burn everything I built to the ground. I don't even care. I want to be a barista. Let me sign in, clock in, just do my job, clock out. Like I sometimes will get like that. Usually, yes, it's usually closer to my luteal phase where I'm just more sensitive or
Yeah.
whatnot. But yes, same. I just love the data that you get from it though to really assess. And exactly what you said, like sometimes too, the things that stress you out can also be things that you like enjoy.
Yeah.
And there's just so much to unpack there. But because it's the first thing that I open up when I wake up, it for me determines a lot of like activity of like, okay, am I going hard in the gym today or do I need to rest and maybe just like walk today? So that's like one of the biggest changes that I feel like it helps me. And then, of course, like, okay, I really need to go to bed at night or whatnot, or I need to be more rest restorative this weekend and not running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
Yeah.
But do you have any non-negotiables in your lifestyle routine that your Oura Ring has helped you create or motivated you to create?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the stress thing, I was able to see, okay, what is it that stresses me out and start to cut from there. And so those have
Okay.
become non-negotiables. The other piece is seeing how much my cycle affects my stress levels. Like leading up to my period, I will be in stress like almost the whole day. And so I've
Wow.
showed myself a lot of grace in that because, you kind of like almost gaslight yourself in that process of like, come on, you can be tougher, you can do this, but
Pull through.
seeing like how much my body is responding to that, I've just realized, okay, I have to follow my cycles, especially at work, and in my life, because I knew all of that, but then having the data, like the data doesn't lie. Yeah.
Honestly, I know sometimes they're like, okay, but I know something's off with like my hormones or my gut. And like, so why do we need like data? I'm like, honestly though, data hits different. Like people can know like, oh yeah, I'm stressed. I'm just a stressed individual. But until they actually see it on paper, they're like, oh my God, like I knew I was stressed, but I'm like, it motivates you to like make change because it's kind of, I guess, scary to see on paper. So honestly, I love data for that reason. It gives people a kick in the pants when
Yeah,
they need it.
totally.
So I love that. Okay, so let's switch over to Enneagram because I know in your bio you mentioned that you are an Enneagram practitioner. So one, just tell me a little bit what that means, and then also explain the Enneagram for people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, so I'll just keep it really basic. So the Enneagram is testing what you're motivated by or your core motivation. So obviously you're going to have different motivations, but what is the core thing that is driving you? And so what's really cool about that is it feels very deep to a lot of people because again, it's getting into like what's driving your actions, right? So a lot of times when people will find their Enneagram, there'll be tears or they're just like, oh my gosh, how do you know me kind of thing.
So I
Um,
felt.
yeah, and so it is really wild in that. And that's why I chose to be certified in that versus some other certifications that I love or assessments that I love, because it can be so deep. Now, on the flip of that, because it can be deep, I've realized it has to be a very mature client that goes through that. So yeah, you can go take a free Enneagram assessment and like get your Enneagram and follow people online, and that's a great way to do it and to get started. But the way that I test and the way that I do it again can be kind of deep, and we're really finding in that of like what caused you to be motivated by those things. So for example, as I've taken clients through this process, some clients again will have done the free stuff and think, okay, like I had one that was like, I'm an Enneagram 8, I know it. As she went through my process, took the assessment that I have, realized she's actually a 4. And so as we're unpacking all of that, it's like, oh, I feel like I had to be an 8 because of my environment. So the eight's really like this challenger, right? And
That's me.
oh, you're an 8? Oh my gosh, that's so
Yes.
funny. So they can tend to feel like they have to have this protective layer. And so she's like, that's who I've felt like I've had to be. So almost like her ego had become that person.
Mm,
But really her core was this very sensitive, very almost kind of like moody in a good way, like 4, right? And
yeah.
so just her unpacking that process was a lot of like, okay, what led you
Yeah.
there? Well, my dad was kind of a jerk and like all that stuff. So
Oh, I love that. I love that.
yeah.
Yes, I'm an 8, and that's why I love the Enneagram was when I did testing, I like everything was pretty much to like an exact T. And I'm like you can ask all my friends, they're like, you should have probably been a therapist. I'm like, I know, I'm very like intuitive and all that, but I'm just like, wow, to read myself on paper is kind of crazy. And the only thing that I don't connect with as like an 8 is something that they struggle with is being vulnerable. And I don't know if it's, there's those layers of like an unhealthy 8 or a healthy 8, but I definitely feel like I have no problem with being vulnerable and all that. Like authenticity, yes, my fear of being controlled, absolutely, which is why I have my own business, which is I just don't want to be under, you can ask my husband. He will absolutely say, you are so anti. He's like, anyone tells you what to do. He's like, that's why like I can't have a personal trainer. I absolutely hate when people tell me what to do. Anyways, I'm like, I mean, that's why my own boss, because I can tell myself what to do. But it's just funny. I just really love it. And I don't know if you see this, but I feel like I attract a lot of 9s as friends.
Mhm.
And I feel like they're just my yin to my yang, of like just being just the peacemaker, but they like, honor and respect like how I am just naturally a protector in so many different ways, like protector of my patients, protector of my employees, my family. Like I've just always been that way. But anyways, I just find that I attract the peacemakers and all
Yeah,
that. So,
that's very common.
and is it okay? That's what I
Yeah.
thought. I'm like, is it because you're the yin to my yang? Is that why?
It must be because I see a lot of marriages like that too. And
Okay, so
so
my
then too,
husband's
if
a
you see
3.
two unhealthy, like an unhealthy 8 that's really strong and kind of controlling, and then an unhealthy 9 that just puts up with it, that's when you can get a really bad dynamic.
Oh,
But yeah,
okay. My
when you
husband's a
when you have 2
3.
healthy, oh, he's a 3. Yeah,
He's a
that's a good
3.
balance.
which
Yeah.
is pretty on point for him. Like, and he's done a lot of like different assessments, and it's always kind of like aligned with that. But that's really cool. Knowing like how the different personality types, do you feel like certain numbers in wellness would do better at certain things? Like again, keeping to, I forgot the one that's like really like well organized. They keep to a schedule. They follow by the rules. Like, do
That's
you
a
just feel
one.
like, yeah, a one. Do you feel like there's certain numbers that do better with incorporating these type of things and ones that would probably struggle with it the most?
Um, so obviously you would think maybe a seven would do the best because a seven is kind of fun loving and like chasing pleasure. But I have found even with a seven, it's then kind of always chasing the next hit of dopamine
Mm.
versus like being able to slow down and really embody it. And then, I just keep going through each number of like who would be the easiest. I almost think if I had to choose one that was the easiest, it would probably be nines because they're motivated by peace, right? And keeping the peace.
Mm.
And so they are very drawn to, okay, yeah, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to, go slow, track my stress, whatever. Where it gets tricky for a nine is communicating their needs and setting those
Mm.
boundaries. So that's what we have to work through.
Yes.
But they already have that internal, like, again, motivation to want to create that peace in their life versus everybody else.
Oh, okay. I actually thought the last half of what you said, like having issues like creating boundaries and communication, but I never thought about it like on the flip side. So that's interesting. Okay. What are you?
So I used to be a five. And then
Okay.
in the
Isn't that the
past,
rare one? There's
yeah,
not a lot of fives or something like that. I
yeah,
thought I
four
read.
and fives are the rarest.
Okay.
And then in time, I've really tried to embody some of the other numbers because once you kind of open your lens to everybody's numbers, you pull what you want authentically.
Love
And
that.
in the past few months, I've shifted to a three.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel like I could see that though. Because I mean, I don't know, I just feel like there's so many entrepreneurs out there that I'm curious on like what I guess because you do it, like what do you feel like is the most popular number that you see?
Um, Goodness. I get a lot of twos.
Oh, I can
Yeah.
I can see that. I mean, my kids take like just a free test just to kind of get the gist. And I would say my daughter is like a two. Like she is like your built-in hype girl. She is like the most ultimate helper of all helpers. She's just like the best. I just love twos.
Yeah. But I will say that was probably my niche at the time of really helping like women come into their power and all that stuff. And twos are like, I want some of that.
Oh, I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
And to close it out,
Mhm.
and you kind of mentioned it too. So maybe it's just the same as what we talked about, or maybe you have a little bit more to add. But how have you seen like that wellness and business intersect for you?
Yeah, so really within the past year, I was at a place, my business was hitting 10 years old. As I said, I was recovering from burnouts and I was about to hit my 40th birthday. And I was just at this place of like, okay, what's next for me? Like, I thought the business that I had would last forever and doing that work because it was so fruitful and so fulfilling and it did well, right? Financially. And last year I was like, I'm just ready to go back to corporate. I'm ready to kind of go
Mm.
into the lion's den, if you will, and really attack wellness from the inside out because all the clients that I
Love
had
that.
were coming from corporate and they were burned out and honestly a lot of them traumatized and I had to help heal them and they were spending thousands of dollars with me to do that and then a lot of them then was like, well, I don't feel safe in corporate so I'm going to go do my own thing, which is beautiful and amazing.
Yeah.
But at the same time I was like, what if we could fix corporate from the inside? And so that's when I started to shift last year and started to bring on a bigger team because again, I had been coaching for 10 years. I was like, I'm kind of ready to like mentor and like have a team to do that. And so started to build this thing called Trust and Leadership Coaching or TLC for short. And so our big thing is going into
Love that.
corporations.
I
Yeah.
just got that. Sorry.
Yeah. So going into corporations and really working on their leadership development and leadership coaching. But what we're doing sneakily, I guess, is not only just giving them the results oriented things, is giving them the wellness in the process. Because as we, again, what we see is a lot of time in middle age, people just start to burn out. And burnout right now is in the highest numbers ever. We're in a loneliness pandemic and all the things. And so we're
Yeah.
really teaching those wellness practices for that longevity of that leader, because otherwise they're going to leave.
Love that. I love that. I love that. And I know that's like And I love, don't get me wrong, I really love the women entrepreneurship and women starting their own thing. But at the same time, I'm like, not everyone can be a business owner. Like, let's be real. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of us may not thrive in being a business owner, and we need employees. There will be no businesses if we don't have employees.
Yeah.
So I'm always just like, love, but also hate the push where it may make people feel inferior, and I don't want them to feel inferior. Like, no, if you love a corporate, getting a salary, don't feel the need or pressure to have to become an entrepreneur because it's like kind of the cool thing to do right now. Because I'm like, there's a lot of lows, like just as there are a lot of highs, and no one ever talks about the lows. They just talk about like the highs and all the money and the freedom. I'm like, that's a whole other conversation. To get that is it's a lot, as you know, like there's a lot of ups and downs. Anyways, and so I love that you are wanting to create a better just environment for people to thrive, because I hate the idea to think like, oh, you can only feel well or find that freedom or whatever, like this positive emotion just being an entrepreneur, and you can't find that in work. And so it does take going on the inside and changing that environment in corporate world so people can be very fulfilled and happy and not feel like they are just burnt out. And it just takes a lot of inside work.
Yeah.
And obviously every company is different, but I just think it's so important, like what you're doing, because it's very needed, because we still need corporate jobs. We need these people to be in these positions, but obviously we need to make sure that they're well too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Do you have any other lasting advice for us? Any resources that comes to mind, books, podcasts that like you just absolutely love? Anything that has helped change, I don't know, mindset, business, anything along those lines?
Gosh, that's a loaded question. As somebody who's a high learner, it's like, oh, what would I choose?
I read a
Um,
lot. I listen a lot.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard. I think what I'll leave with is to follow the nuggets, because in my journey to this place, it was just like one thing after another of like Amen clinics and then hormone testing and the Oura Ring and chiropractic and all that stuff. And I'm just so glad I followed those nuggets. And even though it would lead to like these rabbit holes as we talked about of like, oh my gosh, like even like tongue ties, that was like a whole thing that I had to go through with my daughter. I was like, what in the world am I doing? But just follow those step by step, and I think you'll be guided to where you need to go. And what's great is when you do hire somebody that can look at it from a bigger picture and guide you along the way, be it, a coach or a holistic practitioner or something like that. That's what I wish I would have had, because I just felt like I was kind of creating my own journey, which was beautiful, right? And the nuggets were great, but it would have been nice to kind of have a mentor along the way that guided me. Of course, you
I
always
love
want it
that.
faster looking back, but
I know, I know, I know. But I just feel like also, yeah, having that person to like help guide you in whatever that you're trying to work on, it just yes, helps get the results faster in some ways, but it's also really nice just to have someone to like guide and be there for you like through it all and
yeah.
whatever it is, whether it's like therapy or coaching or health stuff. It's just so nice to have that person that's your person to guide you. So I love that. Where can we find you, Lindsay? Social media, website, anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah. So my business, trustandleadership.com, is the great place to find me, and find what we're doing in the world. And if you vibe with it, you can go to our contact form, fill out your information, and then you'll get on a call with us and we'll connect with you and kind of hear about where you want to grow. And then my big platform that I'm on these days is LinkedIn. I've kind of like revitalized
Oh,
that. So you can just search Lindsay Preston, Lindsay with an A, and find me there.
perfect. Well, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.